Wasn't grade one, I made a big poster and you had to like write your goal, and my goal was 72 billion. Fun being this Canadian company that couldn't get funding, that had to like build based on revenue, and then we ran out of money. Goyle like ran out of money. You know what, screw it, I got nothing to lose. Like I don't care. I'm just gonna keep going, and I'm gonna get 100 no's. I'm probably gonna get maybe one yes. I think if the challenges stopped and the stress stopped, then the company would die. And then I wrote on the whiteboard, "We will sell for more than Skip."
Yeah.
And we're just like, "We're coming for you." Yeah. So I mean, I'm hungry. I'm starving. I love that challenge and that competition. Will that happen?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Tool for Rise podcast, aka the #1 podcast in Winnipeg, where we document the rise and stardom of Winnipeg's talent and personalities, the voice of Winnipeg. Checked the analytics recently and figured out that 83% of you people watching this right now are not subscribed. So if you see a red button that doesn't say subscribed on it, please hit the subscribe button. It gives us a reason to continue doing the show, and it allows us to put the city on the map. Today, we have John Sparrow, an entrepreneur who started multiple businesses, dropped out of high school at the age of 15, and has built a multi-million-dollar empire. Talk about franchising, his mindset, and how he's traveling the world, and has only been in Winnipeg for 14 days when we were able to get him. Hope you enjoy the episode, and again, if you get any piece of value from this, please hit that subscribe button. Enjoy the episode. I saw your notification this morning at 6 a.m. of accepting the request.
Yeah. So I always go into my calendar and I always forget to hit yes.
That's
no.
fine.
So
we knew you were coming.
I was like, oh, you know what? I should probably just hit yes, just in case they're like, oh, we never heard from the guy. Like, screw it.
No, we knew you were coming. I was I just admired the early morning hustle.
Yeah.
So I would not ask, what time do you wake up? What's your
honestly?
What's the grind like?
It's with me being in all these different time zones.
Yes.
I have a hard time being like for example, like I don't have a solid schedule of always being Central Time Zone.
Gotcha.
So it's tough. Like some mornings I might be rolling out of bed at like 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, but I will work till 2 a.m., 3 a.m. So. Yeah. And then if I'm in the Eastern Time Zone, then I'm getting up really early here. Mm-hmm. I prefer the Vancouver time zone, the Pacific Standard Time.
Yeah, okay.
I prefer that everything's already happened in the day, and then you're coming in as like a firefighter to like fix the problems. Versus like in the Eastern Time Zone, you wake up and you're waiting and you're watching these problems and challenges develop. Whereas in like Vancouver, you just you roll to bed. You already got a whole list of things to tackle.
Yeah.
I'm sure fixing out and putting out the fires always didn't, that's not how the business started.
No.
So let's talk about where this journey begins for you. We were just briefly touching on that.
Yeah, I mean, like I've had multiple companies.
Yeah.
Goyle was an accident. It's not a company I wanted to own. Mm-hmm. So if we go way back, I was 16, dropped out of high school, started my first company, and parents are like, if you are going to drop out of school, like number one, like we don't allow this. And I was like, make me go back. They said, okay, you can't live here unless you try and make it like $50,000 or $60,000 a year, because you're not going to live here for free.
Yeah.
And just waste your life away. It's like, okay, screw you guys. I'm going to start a company. Because I had other jobs and I always like moved up to like supervisor level. I was in the cadet program, so like I wasn't like a bad kid. I had a good surrounding community, and so I was like, I'm going to start a company. And that's led into 5 companies now. So I've been going since I was 16. I'm 29 now. It's been like over half a career of time. So I kind of wasted away the late teens and the early 20s into stress and hell, but in a good way. So yeah, Goyle, like at the time when I started it, I just went through a breakup, and remember the girl leaving me. She's like, you're never gonna leave Brandon. You're always gonna be this business guy in Brandon. You're nice, but like you're gonna be stuck. And I was like, screw this person. Like, you know what? Go enjoy your life. Happy for you. But like I've always said I'm gonna go do a business in Winnipeg, and I went to a pitch competition that North Forge held that everyone knows about. It's called Ramp Up Weekend, and I went to it, and I was like, you know what? What's the price? And they're like $1,000. I was like, I don't really have the time to like do all this 55 hours for $1,000. And they're like, no, you get 2 free terms with devs from Red River College. It's like, ooh, that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
So then, I've heard about mobile vehicle maintenance and oil changes. Like, I can spin this up very quickly. We get revenue. We can do everything. So I started it with 2 co-founders there. We had a team of 11 people. We didn't win. We got 3rd place. We had revenue. And I wanted to continue the business. My two partners were like, whoa, 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 whoa. You know, like it was fun weekend. Things were good. You seem to be taking off. Tell you what, we'll sell you our 2/3 of Go Oil.
Yeah.
Is if you give us the prize money, which was $600, I think.
Okay.
So $300 each.
Yeah.
We'll sign off all the rights to the company, and you can own the company. So at that point, I bought Go Oil for the remainder of Go Oil for $600.
That's a good deal.
Which was, you think about what Go Oil's worth now.
Exactly.
Great return on investment. So yeah, and then it was tough though. Like at the time, my businesses in Brandon weren't profitable. They were hell. So like the biggest company I had was a company called Avalanche at the time. And we did like all the Loblaw, Superstore, RBC, like snow contracts.
Okay.
And being like 21 to 23, can't get credit for like big loaders. You know, you got all these big wig companies wanting to pay like net 90.
Yeah.
I remember there was so many times where I thought we were gonna go bankrupt. My dad always laughed at me. He's like, man, like you have no debt. Like sure you may owe some subcontractors, but like who cares? Like you're growing, you got a good business. But it was tough because I couldn't pull money out of that to grow Go Oil. So I'd drive into Winnipeg because I lived in Brandon still. I'd drive into Winnipeg and like North Forge rented me a desk for like $200 a month. Yeah. And I would work for 3 days on Red Bull and like I'd take naps in the truck. I'd just work. And I would like work for 3 or 4 days or I'd like sleep on a friend's couch. And I would drive back to Brandon, spend 2 days with my other company and usually sleeping and then drive back. So I did that for 2 years and in the first 2 years of Go Oil. And we were like hiring staff. So every time Go Oil had enough money for me to like, okay, you can relax, you can have an apartment, you could, you know, you don't have to do this hell is what I called it. We're always like, oh, we need to hire this person. Oh, we need to do this next thing. And it was tough, but we pushed through those first 2 years and we expanded today. So just to touch on like where Go Oil is today, we have 408 franchise units that we've sold across Canada and the United States. We've raised just under $1 million in venture capital from Vancouver.
Congratulations.
You're not raising venture capital in Manitoba unless it's from some friends and family.
Of course.
You know, we compete against two competitors. One's raised $130 million. They're both the same service network as us.
In Canada?
US and US. And the other one sold for over $200 million. We're a little bigger than them with their service network. So it's fun being this Canadian company that couldn't get funding, that had to like build based on revenue, and then now have the same service network as these companies that raise hundreds of millions.
Yeah.
And we're just like, we're coming for you. We're coming for you in the nicest way. We're like, we're coming for you.
No, I love this spirit. Of course, that's you know, you're not playing for second place here. You know?
No, not at all.
Exactly.
I think people think businesses is all like, oh my God, you're doing the same things we have. Like we have respectful relationships. Like we know all the founding teams of the other ones, and I go for beer with them or drinks or dinner. But like, if they're on the side of the cliff and I have an option to save their company or like push it over the cliff, I'm choosing the push, but in a nice way.
Yeah, of course. No, it makes sense. I want to dive into the story as we go on, but I want to touch on the very first part you mentioned about dropping out of high school at 16.
Yeah.
What led to that decision? Why was that something that you were passionate about or even ended up doing?
Yeah, I think like, you know, it kind of started in middle years. I didn't know I was dyslexic until like going into grade 10.
Okay.
And I always struggled at school. And the biggest thing is the school, you know, at the time, they're like, oh, we'll give you this, I would say a very early version. Like if I had ChatGPT, oh my God, I would have been fine because my brain, everything's up here. I'm very good with my brain. I can, it's very quick. You want me to write something? You want me to spell something? It's not happening. It's just not happening. So towards the end, I did all verbal testing and I got really good grades. But I just found I was so behind. I had problems with like kids and bullying, and I was like, I moved schools. By the time I moved to a different school, I realized like I'm just so far behind. I don't fit in the system. I don't want to be here. And then I just left. I was like, I ain't coming back. I ain't coming back.
Wow.
And then, you know, they have things called truancy officers, which show up to your house and basically have the rights to like drag you back to the school. And I remember when he came to my house and I was like, yeah, I started a company. And he's like, okay, this is not the normal.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, you want to have coffee? And so we went and had coffee, and he's like, okay, well, you're one of the only students this year I'm not going to force going back to school.
Oh.
And he said that you might get fined from the government, but have fun.
So was starting the company solely based off of just like when your parents said, hey, you got to make at least
Yeah,
$50,000?
you gotta make money at the time. Like I had a Camaro, I blew the engine in. I really wanted to like make the money to replace the engine in that Camaro. And the funny thing is that I finally put that engine in that Camaro 3 years ago, and I literally drove it for the first time like 3 years ago. And I remember the girl at the time I was dating. Like we went for one drive, and she's like, "What's wrong?" I was like, "It's not the goal anymore." Yeah. And I sold it. I was like, I fixed it. The 16-year-old me was like, needed this. And, 27-year-old me was just like, you know what? I got different goals now.
That's very powerful.
Let it go.
Yeah. Wow. What was your first company that you started like right away? Yeah,
so it's called Curbside.
And how long did it take? Like, so you decided to drop out, and then like, is there a time period in between?
It's pretty quick.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, if you say you're gonna kick me out of your house, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go hard. So yeah, Curbside started right away. The residential garbage recycling bins.
Gotcha.
I thought it was a great idea to charge senior citizens and people that were lazy on Fridays to move their garbage bins back and forth. And for somebody that's like 16, 17, it was a great business.
Yeah.
And, we continued it. I think we got up to about 700 sets of bins. It's about $38 a month per set of bins. Great business. Very tough to sell. So I was actually discouraged quite a bit because you go door to door and try and convince people to like hire to do this service that nobody really needs besides if you're disabled, but then you're competing with the city that does it for free, but does like a mediocre job at it. The city wouldn't hire me to do it. They had to use the union workers, which is fine. And then the apartment buildings, some of them would hire us, but it was a very tough thing to sell. And so when I went into the next business, I was like, oh, I'm actually really good at sales. Like I went from something really hard to something a lot easier to sell.
What was that process like in terms of going door to door and selling? Like, what was your pitch? Like, you're 16, 17, trying to sell them.
I think like it was tough. Like I struggled with the spelling and stuff, and I remember I was always super stressed because not very many people wanted to like help with it, and like I would sit up at night spell checking all my flyers and stuff. And I'd drop it off at some university professor's house, and she would write me a freaking huge email on like all my mistakes and my grammar, and it was embarrassing. But like I was just like, you know what, screw it, I got nothing to lose. Like I don't care. I'm just gonna keep going. And I was more like, I'm gonna get 100 no's. I'm probably gonna get maybe one yes. But you know what? That one yes can pay me $38 a month for the next year on contract, and then you get a couple hundred of those, and all of a sudden you have a pretty sick, easy business to run. So
where's that mindset come from? Was that something you had when you were younger?
When I was younger, I've always been like a business person. I was always like scheming, is what my parents would call it. Like for example, ever since I was a young kid, we'd have Halloween, and we get huge amount of Halloween candy. And I always traded off the good candy for all the bad candy with my siblings. And I had like little semi trucks, and I'd like deliver it to them. And like we had this whole thing set up.
So cute.
But my siblings and like my friends didn't realize is I knew they're gonna blow through their candy, and I knew if I held the crappier candy that I could trade 3 to 1 or 4 to 1, that I could later leverage that later. And then like I at school I'd like make name tags. My mom bought me a calligraphy kit, and I was like, I'm gonna learn calligraphy, and I like learned how to write special letters, and I would like sell them for like $2 at school. And then principal shut that down, and then my mom bought me a thing of 500 pens. We made pen cannons, and you fired the eraser at the back of the teacher. Don't recommend. But I mean, I got $5 a pen until that operation got shut down. So like I was always like on the radar with the principals for being like, hey, you're skipping school, you're not here, you're starting illegal businesses in school, like, this is bad, like, you shouldn't want to make money, like, I'm like, okay, well,
you have no registered LLC to sell these pens,
like are you charging tax? I'm like,
GST, PST, like, where's that going?
No, I'm just like, I'm here to like do things for me, and but it goes way back. Like I've always been, ever since I was a little kid, like I was in grade 1, I made a big poster, and you had to like write your goal, and my goal was 72 billion.
Wow.
And I have that poster, and my mom has it at her house, my mom and dad's house, and So ever since grade 1, I've always known like the number 72 billion, and this is the journey to get there. And will we get there? Maybe I'll be 100 when it happens. And inflation is so much that 72 billion everyone has, but like if we get to the number, I'll be cool. I'll be happy.
Wow. So that's your number,
That's
72
the number.
billion.
Yeah.
So that's the goal that you're chasing.
That's the
now?
goal that me in grade 1, my second year of grade 1, because I failed grade 1 the first year, decided that's what the goal was.
And you stuck
and I keep reminding myself every year, like little Mr. Grade 1 guy apparently knew what 72 billion was, because I think I asked my teacher, I said, who's the richest guy in the world at the time? And it was around that 72 billion mark. It's like, cool.
Watch me.
Watch me get there, right? So a long ways to go. Long ways to go.
The transition from like your first business, second business, third business, what were some of like the skill sets you required like really quickly? You said you learned how to do sales right away.
Yeah, I'd say like, even though like I don't have the high school education, I don't have the university education, I've paid through with a lot of mistakes. So like you've had to pick up like management, accounting, sales. I think people management and like, you know, relationship and soft skills, like soft conversation skills, you know, how to deal with like mistakes or disappointment, or like, you know, when things go bad, like there's situations I didn't handle right, and I had to learn through those experiences. So I've learned through experiences, and it's gotten easier and easier and easier to do business, and I'm just becoming better and better and better. So yeah, like a lot of things just don't affect us, and so yeah, it's learned by doing. Like we hire a lot of like people that are coming on university and grad, and the common response we get is the way I run my company is they're just like, holy crap, like I just feel like I should have did this first. Because like we keep small teams, and we just take on a lot. We take on a lot. So, and I hire very differently than most people. Like my policy is when I hire you today, we 100% trust you. We just want you to make a decision. Doesn't matter if it's a bad decision, just make the decision. And you got 100% of trust. If you lose that trust, you don't work here. So you get 100% of trust. Everyone starts with 100% trust. Make decisions. We still trust you if you make the wrong decision, as long as you own up to why that decision was made. And so you end up having these people that come in and own departments. They're like, okay, this is my area. This is my section. I'm making the decision. It's great because like half the decisions in the company I'm not even involved in. So,
and it gives them ownership to be like they're part of something bigger.
Yeah, like, you know, team decided to terminate a franchise. They didn't even talk to me. They're like, bad for culture, bad for company. They need to go. I was like, oh, great. Sounds good. Oh, you already got the lawyer involved. Perfect. Thank you.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thanks for the team update.
Comes in the Slack
Was
message.
that always the goal to, you know, we kind of say like not work in the business, but work on the business instead? Like,
yeah, I think one thing I've realized over time, it's kind of controversial a little bit, but like, I think it's the same amount of brain power to build a local business as to build a national business. And the same thing is internally in a company. If you want to build a small company and micromanage everyone, you will have a small company. But if you want to have a big company and you realize that, okay, what am I building? Am I going to build a national or big company? Then great, I can't be involved in every decision. I need to make sure that I'm laying out the ground rules for people to just make decisions and do things. And so that way a company like ours can function like a huge company without actually we're really not internally not that big. So yeah, you at the end of the day, like my goal is to have a business that if I died tomorrow would continue to function. Everyone has the right permissions, people have the right training, people know how to run it. They all know who's going to step into my position. Like it could run. Like I can go on vacation for 2 weeks and I'm sure things would happen, but like no, the business wouldn't collapse.
So does that come off of you? Is it more system building? Like you build internal systems where?
I think you build people and systems. You build the people up and you give the people the support to build the systems. You don't necessarily have to build every system in a business because not all my ideas are going to be the best idea. Right. I might have a team member that, and we have disagreements all the time. Like I have a team member. If you want him to write an insurance document, he will write you the best insurance document. He's very black and white. Love him for it. I'm very gray. So like you can see where those things can clash. But in some instances where I would handle situations very differently, I'm like, you know what? You are better to handle this, and I'm going to stay out of it, because if I step in, you know, I might be creating more problems. So I'm going to let you, as the black and white guy, deal with it. And then, you know, I got somebody else that's not scared to like get a little bit more feisty and call people and have those more aggressive conversations. I'll let her step in and do that. And I'll be like, oh yeah, you know, I'm really sorry. She got really angry at you. I can see her point, but let me be the nice guy now. So yeah, yeah, that's how I'd put it.
That's awesome. In terms of going from your first to second, how did you make that decision of like, okay, this is not working, I'm going to switch to something else?
Honestly, I've always started businesses when I didn't want to start them. So I had Curbside at the time. Avalanche was the next one. And I wanted to partner with like a local landscaping company to kind of like sell our bin services with their, as like a premium with their clients. And they're like, nah, not really interested. I'm like, you know what, screw you guys. Like, you know what, I thought I came to them with like a good idea and maybe I didn't approach it right. It's like, fine, you know what, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do the same thing. And I did really well. I was at that point where I was like, you know, maybe I'm not a good sales guy, because like selling that original service was so hard that when I went into selling snow, I was shocked. I was shocked because like, you think about it, at 16, 17, I had to sell to, I think the average customer is over 80. Okay. So I had all these older people that they were mostly hiring me to just have conversations. Okay. So the people skills were like really good. Because like I remember I'd go like move some old guy's bin and I tried to only be in a property for like 30 seconds, 45 seconds. And this guy always had, like, his wife would have tea ready and like he'd have to talk. So I mean, like I got the people skills down. So then when I went into sales for Avalanche and like, you know, going into these snow contracts, it's like, you know, like I'm going to sell you something everyone needs, but like, what do you currently don't like about your current provider, or what are 3 things that you really wish you had? And they'd be like, yeah, you know, we really hate how they show up to clear a church the morning of. I was like, oh, so if somebody came the night before, and then if it dust again, you would pay for us to come back. And they're like, yeah. I was like, cool. Well, you want to try it out?
Yeah.
No problem.
Wow.
So it was more of the soft. I'm not a hard salesperson. I'm not going to twist your arm. I'm not going to be like, oh my God, I'm going to drop an extra $500 if you sign by the end of the day. I am more like, fire us if you don't like us. I'm not going to sign an intense contract with you. At the end of the day, I only want to work with people that want to work with us. Yeah. That's it.
There's that threshold of like there's a lot of people that want to start a business, right? And they get caught up in I don't have the perfect name for it. I don't have the perfect system in place for it. When did that threshold? Yeah, I don't have a logo. Like, when did that threshold start decreasing for you? And you're like, fuck it. Like, I have an idea, put it into place right away.
I am very rapid to get things going. Nothing's ever perfect. Like, I started Go Oil when I didn't even have a place to live here in the city. I started Go Oil when I had 0 extra money to spend. I would like nap in the truck and like work at this, you know, I think North Forge, like even the $200 from Go Oil's bank account in the early days, they're like, oh, you're like a month behind. I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to get to it. But you know, we were so broke. And you know, the first employee we hired, I remember I offered him 30% of the company or a wage, and he said to me, he's like, there's no guarantee Go Oil's going to go anywhere, so I need like the $4,000 a month. And I was like, fuck. Like this is gonna suck. And you know, that led to a bigger conflict later, because Go Oil did become successful. And then that conversation of like, well, hey, you know, I want that 30% now. And we're like, you chose your thing, and we ended up splitting from that person. But you know, how do you handle those difficult conversations, right? But again, back to your point, just you could, like, Go Oil's original logo looks like crap. It was like clip art. It was garbage. You know, we accidentally ended up with the logos and stuff that we have today. Design company was like, can we just tweak your logo? And I was like, what do you mean tweak? And it was Relish branding. They're still here in Winnipeg. And Stan's like, yeah, I'm going to tweak it. But I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm just going to tweak it. I was like, okay, you can tweak it.
Gotcha.
Came with a whole different brand. Okay, I understand why we spent that. Okay, this is a good tweak. Good tweak, Suzanne. Good tweak.
Wow.
But yeah, it doesn't really matter about your first logo. Like, you can look at every brand's first logo. The name can change. Like, who cares? Like, at the end of the day, like, can you convince people outside of your friends and family to pay you to do something? Because like, I always say, your friends and family are going to lie to you. They're always going to say, oh, such a great idea. Your grandma's going to be like, I'm so proud of you. Like, it makes so sense. You're going to be so successful. I'm like, don't talk to me. Do not talk to me, because you're giving me artificial advice. You're giving me artificial hope. I need to go to a complete random stranger and convince that person that this is true feedback, is what I call it. And are they actually going to, are they going to give you $100? Are they gonna, whatever the service product is. And if you can, you talk to 10 people and convince 3. So that's where it comes from. But if everyone in your family is like, oh my God, this is the best thing in the world, everything's good, I'm just like.
What was the story behind Go Oils? So like this was created in a weekend over you mentioned that you went to the startup.
Yeah, it's 55 hours.
Yeah.
You show up, you pitch your idea, a bunch of people join your team. And then...
do you remember like the actual process of everything of like, hey, let's sit down, let's brainstorm a couple ideas.
Yeah, so they put you in a big room. There's like 50, 60 people in the room. Everyone kind of like pitches their ideas up in front of everyone. And then they write the ideas on paper around. You can go and sign your name to which team you want to be in. Yeah. And so like the top, out of maybe 40 ideas, the top 10 ideas are chosen. And so we were lucky that one of our designs, my idea was chosen. And then you get to spend the weekend to like build something out of it, right? And you're judged at the end of the 55 hours of like what you did. Yeah. And I remember sitting there and we had all these university students helping us, and they're like, we have to get like revenue this weekend. We have to get revenue. And I went and like got a truck and outfitted it to do tools. And I think we did $700 or $800 that weekend in oil changes. We just had we had to have a website up. We had to have a logo. Like, we did the cheat sheet startup where like we have to look like we have traction. We did have traction, but we had to make it. We had to like extra sell it. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. To win. So yeah.
But in 55 hours, or like 40, like couple in 2 days to have how big was the team? And
11.
11. Okay. So then there was different people doing different things.
Yeah.
But to just drop money on like, hey, listen, we're gonna go get a truck. Was that?
Well, so it's funny. I had one of my snow trucks was branded with Avalanche. Gotcha. And I had another friend, and I said, can I switch you trucks for the weekend? They had like a normal like F-150 thing. Yeah. It was black, and I said, can I just switch you trucks? And they're like, why? I was like, I need to decal your truck. So we went and got like decals for like the window and made it look like a service truck. And we have pictures of we have a video of our first customer service. Like, we milked it. We milked every win. Like, we'd interview people. What do you think of this? And we milked it. Like, I remember my one friend, he's like, oh, I'll get an oil change, but I can't afford it. I was like, okay, here's the $100. Pay me now, and you can pay me back later. Nice. So just everything to get it done.
So were you actually doing the oil changes yourself?
For that weekend. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. So how do you go and scale that up eventually after... the 55 days are over now. You've proven the concept.
Yeah, so we took 6 months to kind of figure out if this is worth doing. So I did services. I think we did $60,000 or $70,000 in sales that first year, and I was like, okay. And then what happened is through North Forge, I met these ladies that have been franchising for 35 plus years or 30 years, and they're like, you should franchise this. And I was like, I don't really know if I want to do franchising. I kind of want to grow this corporately. And she's like, well, is your credit any good? And I was like, no, my credit's shit. And I was like, okay. She's like, well, I'm going to show you franchising. And then I spent time with them. And then I realized like franchising is kind of my game. Yeah. I love the whole royalty play. I love, you build an agreement, you build the system, you show people how to run this business, you show them how to be successful in it. And then you can balloon very quickly. Like Go Oil's only 7 years old. Or it's going to be 7 here right away. 408 locations. Wow. Yeah. It's pretty 7 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And we're a team of 6. We opened 16 cities in January.
Wow.
So most all US based with those ones. To do that corporately, like the amount of teams, people, money, it'd be crazy. It'd be crazy.
You mentioned that you took like the 6 months to determine if it was like worth it.
Yeah.
What was like the metric to see this
Getting
is
other
worth
people
it?
to pay us. You know, can a fleet client pay me? How do we position it? And trying different ways of offering it. Necessarily didn't need a return on my initial investment. I was just playing around with the idea of like, how does this work? What are we going to do with it? At that time, we weren't going to franchise. We were looking at how to grow corporately. And again, like that weekend, I said, I don't want to own another company. And after that weekend is, I don't want to own another company because the other ones were so stressful. And I was just like, I don't want to own another company. And Goyle kept proving like, well, no, this is actually a good thing. This is a very good thing. You should keep working on it. And I kept getting the results of like, no, this is good. This is good. And I'm just like, oh, I don't really want it. My parents were laughing at me. They're like, you're cursed. Like you're always going to be running companies. Enjoy it. So
it's so easy to stay motivated when you come up with the idea yourself, right? You have internal goals. Where does that lead into in terms of leadership? Like convincing other people to believe in the same mission, if not align their goals with your mission.
Yeah, so I tell people like I'm an open book, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm an open book. This is where we want to get the company. Like Go Oil's kind of like initial exit goal is like Skip at the time sold for like 200 plus million. And then I wrote on the whiteboard, we will sell for more than Skip.
Yeah.
Will that happen? It could. It could in the next 18 months. It could. Do you think, are we going to do it? Are we going to go for more? Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. But that was the original goal, was like sell for more than Skip. And nothing against Skip. They built a great business. Billion-dollar company now. But like, it was a good goal to set. And so telling people that was a goal, like, oh yeah, like let's go. Like I want to be on the original team. Like let's dive in. So yeah, and giving people those space to like make decisions and kind of own departments, and they come up with their own ideas. And you know, one thing in Winnipeg that doesn't really exist is like the whole equity shot, right? Like, you know, typically you join a startup, you'll work for minimum wage and you get a whole bunch of equity, like Neo Financial. Like you'll get a livable salary, but you can choose to have big equity, or you can have a better salary or low equity, but they're really incentivizing the equity piece. Nobody wanted to take equity in Go Oil until in the last year and a half. So I've owned pretty much all of Go Oil. No employees have taken equity until recently. That's changing now. But so yeah, we had to convince people to work for us when we had no money, pay them what they were wanting, but then convince them that this is a good bet long term without the equity piece. So it's not easy. It's challenging, and we lost good people because, you know, XYZ company comes in and says, I'm going to pay you $3,000 more a month. I'm like, hey man, I'm not going to convince you not to take it. But you're good. Door's always open.
Damn. As far as coming up with the mission and getting everyone on board, you mentioned like putting it on the whiteboard. Was the goal always to exit, or did you want to keep it? Like, did you start Go Oil with the intention of exiting eventually?
So Go Oil's been the child I didn't want. Right. And it's with me. It's stuck. And as the child that's taken the most attention. I do look at businesses as children sometimes in their stage of development. So I'd say Go Oil is more in that 14-year-old range now, starting to develop their own attitude and like self-reliance, independence. Whereas in the early days, it was still in diapers and needed all the extra change. So like relating companies to like age of what a child would be is kind of what I do. And like the goal for Go Oil is, you know, let's be the largest service network in North America and globally. And how fast can we scale to do that? Can we open Australia? What's the cost to open Australia? Everyone's like, oh, that's crazy. And I'm like, oh, lawyers come back and be like 150 grand. I was like, great. Sales team, find franchisee to take on an area development and sign an agreement, and then we can say we open Australia. So that's under the works right now. The US, like I remember when we went to the US, like I had a franchisee, he's like, you know, nobody's gonna buy from a Canadian. I was like, oh really? Nobody's gonna buy from a Canadian? Okay. He's like, I tell you what, he's like, you get me a van. And I was like, okay, this is not going the way I want. You get me a van, you rent it to me. I'll prove the market for you. And we've already proved ourselves in Canada. I was like, oh, fine. So I gave him a van, and he ended up doing like $25,000 to $35,000 a month on average. He has about an 80% gross margin, And he's like, yeah, it's still not good enough. I was like, that's an amazing business for one service van. And you know, they've been partners with us ever since. They've expanded. They pretty much have every city in Florida covered now. Great team. But we kind of took that initial jump with them to kind of prove the market, which then ballooned into the rest of the United States opening. And so we like to do that in other countries. So it's I don't know, you know, maybe lost from your original question, but like to get into these like other markets or countries, like take a hammock, service van, sleep in the back of the service van, and just get it open. Grind it out.
Yeah. Do you have a story from like the grind phase that like sticks with you, or you said the hell phase, that when you went through all that, do you have a story that sticks out?
Yeah, so I think when we opened that original like Florida one, the van was close to Vancouver, and it had to go from pretty much Vancouver area to Miami, 60 hours. Ooh. And I remember like the team's like, so see you in 2 weeks, because like, you know, we hired a lot of people coming to university, so they can't necessarily crawl, you know, international students on visas and stuff, like they can't necessarily go to the United States. So then it was just as me. So that was heck. I mean, like, we've been through a lot. Like, we used to have an internal developers. And we kind of came out of the college program, and we kind of got an office space, and we had 2 other startups move in. One is very successful. They're called TAFE today. Super successful guys. But they had a little room in my office because they were a broke startup at the time. We were more fortunate. We can afford a building. It's fine. So I was trying to give back. The other one was more of an ed tech startup. They did like $1,500 in a year of sales. And they want to keep their developers together. So we inherited their developers. And this is probably Goel's biggest horror story. And, you know, the second floor of our office is all branded in their branding, their original company, but they were all now on our payroll. And so we needed them to build software to replace our backend, and they were building it, but they were building it that they only wanted to deploy it at the end, which it's not how we build software today. But we never got to use the software, and you know, what turned into a $100,000 budget turned into $200,000, then $250,000, and then we ran out of money. Goel like ran out of money, and I remember like we brought a VC in, and that VC's like, you know, you have a really good software product if it is what they say it is, and we ran out of money, and the guy leading that team took it really bad, and they claimed they owned the software, and they sold it for $500,000. So we were left with nothing. We just spent like $250,000, $300,000. They sold it. Lawyers came in. You got to be careful with lawyers because, you know, the lawyer's like, oh man, this is gonna be like 4 years. Like, it's such a clean cut case. And at the time, we were raising money from our investors that we have, the founders of Hootsuite in Vancouver. I remember what Ryan said to me. He said, have you seen the software? I was like, no. He's like, what if it's shit? I was like, I don't know. He's like, tell you what, does it really matter if you own that software, or maybe you just get a lifetime license? Like, let them own it. Just say you'll release the software and let them own it. So instead of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal and dragging people through court, I said, go start your new startup. You got the funding. We're going to take this as a big L, and we signed a license, and we got the software, and turns out they were building software for other startups in Winnipeg with our money. Big shock. And it was built too big. Like, it would take too much to maintain. And so our investors are like, well, hey, we have our own dev shop in Vancouver. You know, we built Hootsuite. We've built all these other massive companies that have come out of it. We're not cheap, but you'll spend money. So we spent, you know, $400,000 or $500,000 with them since we worked with them, and we have software we use today and 10 times better. And I wish if I could go back in time, I never would have inherited another startup in their culture. I would have tried to kill that culture, bring them in fresh. But I think I needed to go through that lesson, because it's a lesson that was the second time I had that happen to me. Not in the same way. First time was like I shared a shop with another gravel company, and it was like an 8,000 square foot building. The deal was we were both on the lease, and we'd pay half the lease. The guy made like one lease payment and then stopped paying leasing and kind of disappeared. And would come back, and then I couldn't afford it, and I was broke, and that was also tying into like Goel's early days. Is like I took on this debt that we couldn't afford. We could afford to pay half of it, but we couldn't afford to pay the whole 8,000 square foot building. And that was a lesson of like trying to look for signs ahead of time on how people handle. So, you know, losing that software was that was the second time. It's like you didn't learn your lesson the first time on what I call shitty deals or bad deals, but yeah, it sucked. That was the biggest horror story for Go Oil. Wow. But it also turned into, you know, raising money at such a vulnerable, like we were like, Ryan, like we're trying to raise like money from you guys, and we just got punched really hard in the face. Like all of our wind and sales. But the funny thing is like Go Oil was such a strong company and concept that we could take a $250,000 hit and keep walking. Right? So, and then turn around and spend $400,000 to replace everything we tried building. So
that's crazy. How do you deal with stress?
I sleep well at night. I sleep well at night. You can only control, like, you can't get angry. You can only control, like, you kind of have to say to yourself, is this something I can do or change, or you know? If you can't, then you're like, okay, off the shoulders, right? Like maybe this isn't me. This isn't a me issue, right? If it's a me issue, then I can deal with it. I think if the challenges stopped and the stress stopped, then company would die. I think a company that's scaling it the way that we're scaling, there's always problems. There's always going to be, and you're going to be judged on how you deal with those challenges and problems. You have to take emotion way out of the business. 100%. Like we have this saying internally at Go Oil, we have a business hat and a personal hat. And so when everyone puts their business hat on, anything we say or do with the business hat on, you have to be very good at separating it, isn't against anyone personally, right? Like I walk up to a staff member and be like, that was a really bad call. Like it cost us a lot. And I could just be more candid in that conversation. Then I can put the personal hat on and say, man, like how's things going? Like we try to separate those two roles because we're moving at such a fast pace that there's no time for kind of like that affecting you personally side. So I don't let decisions like, you know, somebody could sue me. And the way I always say, if somebody's suing me, I should be able to go for dinner and have coffee with them and drink and be like, this is a conversation outside of the business, right? Not everyone can do that. I'm also like 15 years into doing this in business. And also like, I think a lot of people let emotions get the best side of them in business. People make emotional decisions. We don't. We're very much like Spock level logic. This logically makes sense. And there's sometimes I just want to do something to spite it. And our team's like, you know, maybe this is, you know, you'd feel good, but what do you get out of it? What do you win? Right? Some things aren't worth fighting for.
This story is very inspiring, and the reason I say that is because we like to think that we're on a similar path in terms of, you know, we're hustling to achieve something that's yet to be achieved in the city, and it's very inspiring to see, because I'm like, what 15-year-old drops out of high school, then lives the rest of his life building businesses, falling hard, taking major losses. Like that's not the ideal story everyone wants to have, right?
You know what? I would say my education, because all of our losses I mark as education, right? So my education is probably north of $700,000 now over my 15 years. Totally cool with that. Totally cool with that. You know, people would be like, you could have gone to university for a lot cheaper. Yeah, but you know what? Like, I think the logging these all as education is the only thing that we can do. That's how I think I can sleep at night. That's, you know, it's funny because, you know, those guys that were on that dev team, it was about 6 or 7 guys. The one guy will always hate me to the rest of my life. It's just the personality he is. The other ones, no. Like the other one, some of them have gone out to start their own companies, and I will invest in their companies. I don't hold anything against them for what happened. You can't, right? Like, do I think it was fair what they did? No. Do I think it was ethical? No. Could I go and get their college involved in ethics, and could I take them to court? Yeah, it's not worth it. But I think people make mistakes. I've made mistakes in business. But you know, they got their own companies, they got their own things, and you know, whether that's me helping them get into, you know, an accelerator to support their new business, right? there's always a new day tomorrow, and what somebody did yesterday doesn't mean that's who they are moving forward, right? So, you know, those guys have all separated and gone out, and that other company is now successful in Winnipeg. And so, yeah, how can I support them be better, be in the community? How can we make sure that they grow as well, even though they hurt me pretty good? I don't want them to fail.
Even though you had major losses and going against teammates and staff, what are some like the big W's, like the big wins, even whether they're large or whether they're small but they feel so large at the time?
You know, so we service the majority of Amazon's fleet in Canada, and in the United States, some parts of it. We're taking on more and more and more. A lot of people think that we did that because we probably have some sales team going out and doing it. That came as a cold call.
To Jeff Bezos?
No. So what happened is Go Oil has pretty much every city in Canada covered. Yeah. And in large parts of the United States. And we got this cold call from this guy, and he's like, I work for Amazon. I was like, okay, yeah, sure. Cool, how can I help you? And I remember I took the phone call, and because I still answer some of these customer support calls. And he's like, yeah, we're interested in doing a pilot. You guys seem to be the largest one in Canada. And we're like, well, we are the largest one in Canada. Everyone else is mom and pop. And he's like, cool. Are you interested? I was like, well, we've already been servicing all the rental vehicles for Amazon, but the branded units, we knew that they came in, but we didn't know how we could service them because they were through a different leasing company and they wouldn't allow mobile maintenance. And they're like, well, we're going to ask you to help us design a mobile maintenance program. I was like, cool. We're down to be in the pilot. So I think we did Alberta, Manitoba, and Nova Scotia, a few other places as well. Launched a pilot with them, service, put dedicated trucks. So that was really cool. Like that experience of like building to the point where one of the largest companies in the world is phoning you and saying, you guys are big enough that we think that you guys would do it. So, and the funny thing is that you think we'd have to like roll out like extra money or like extra resources. We didn't have to roll out any resources. We had all the trucks, we had all the staff, we had all the systems and everything in place. It was literally like turning on, like we do U-Haul and all these other rental car companies. So it was literally just another client with thousands of vehicles, right? And in the US, we're in the middle of onboarding 2 fleets in total about 24,000 vehicles. Again, it's not because we've been building this with franchisees, and those franchisees have their own access to capital and they can grow and scale quickly. You know, going to your franchise partners and saying, hey guys, 24,000 vehicles, all these cities, we have to cover these cities that we're not in. And they're like, yeah, no problem. Nice. We'll get it done. Wow. So there's no big lift from us at all. Wow. Didn't have to change the system, didn't have to change the software, didn't have to change the way we service customers, how we deal with things. It just...
That's awesome.
What allows you to continue to be successful? Like it's hard to, you know, once you've hit that initial like launch, it's like a snowball effect in terms where it slowly starts building up, but there's a point where it plateaus, right?
Yeah, so I love building companies. I'm not necessarily the best person to run companies long term. Like if we're looking at growing at 3% a year, shoot me. Like that's not my cup of tea, and I'll be honest, it's not my cup of tea. Like if we start growing at 3% a year, like I will be the first to hire some CEO that loves that. That's like, oh yeah, 3% this year. No, like we're trying to double, triple. Like I'm hungry to grow because like, you know, I think it's also the kid in me too that goes, when you see your competitor raise 130 million and you're going to compete. Like my favorite sales tactic in the United States is I go to one of my customers, one of their customers, and I'm like, you know, I'm not going to compete on price, but I can guarantee you 90% of every dollar you spend with us goes back to the local franchise owner. And they're like, yeah, but we're using your competitor. I was like, yeah, and 90% of that's going back to North Carolina. And they're like, oh. I'm like, so the local owner that lives in your city financially benefits from this transaction. I'm not going to compete on price. I'm going to compete on local community and local investment. Like, what's the other 10%? I was like, you're looking at them. Let's go. Yeah. So I mean, I'm hungry. I'm starving. I love that challenge and that competition in a nice way. You know, like anytime somebody leaves those companies, I'm the first to interview them and try and hire them. Like I'm hungry, competitive to like get that done. So yeah, it's super exciting, right? Like We have a major tire brand right now that's looking at white labeling our services because they want to offer our services as like an addition, right? And super hungry for that, right?
Yeah.
Like let's keep these deals going and let's get another country open. And I think once that starts to slow down, that's when I know my time is kind of up at the company. You know, one of my staff asked me the other week, we went on a business trip together to Vancouver. He's like, man, I don't understand why you just don't sell.
Yeah.
He's like, you own this whole company. You know, you probably sell Goyle for 20, 40 million today. Why don't you just peace out?
Yeah.
Take the 20 to 40 million. I was like, then what? Then what? Like I can't sit at home.
That's true.
Right? Like I've only been in Canada 14 days this year. You know, what am I gonna do? Gonna go have kids, gonna get married, gonna live a normal life? No, it's just not how I'm made. So my time with Goyle is not up. We're not at that sell for more than skip mark. We're not at that global penetration outside of North America yet. You know, we haven't either bought or completely destroyed one of our competitors yet. So we're not at those goals, right? And until we kind of hit those goals, I'm still having fun.
Wow. How has your perspective changed on deals and inflow? Because you mentioned like the first month when you were doing your garbage thing is like $38 a month. Yeah. And now I'm sure the deals are much bigger. How's your perspective changed throughout those years?
I mean, we sold Texas. We sold the whole state of Texas for a lot of money.
Can you say it?
Yeah.
We'll bleep it out.
Yeah, I put it this way. So Texas, I think they have to open in the one region. It's like 156 service trucks. Our initial franchise fee is $25,000 for the first truck, $15,000 for the remaining trucks.
Gotcha.
So you kind of do the math. It's a good chunk of change.
Wow.
So that ownership group has to develop that region and area over a number of years. That was cool. That was cool.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I was not involved in that deal. My sales team, my sales guy, and my COO orchestrated that whole deal. I literally came in to sign the paperwork. And I remember when the payment came in, Tino, who sold the deal, because like this is a life-changing commission, right?
Yeah.
So the wire came in, and Tino comes in the office. He's like, because we normally, as soon as the wire comes in, we wire out the commission same day. And so the wire came in, and we have a transparent, we're a transparent company. There's only 6 of us, so everyone knows the bank account balance. Everyone knows how much money we're spending. Like it's clear. It's very clear. So he saw the deposit, and he like phones me. He's like, "So are you gonna wire my commission?" I was like, "Well, maybe we need to think about it." And you know, my COO, which helped with the deal, and also got commission. They both sitting there, and I was like, "We should go for lunch, and have this." And it was an emotional lunch. Like that's like getting you know, probably 3 or 4 times the average Canadian salary in one commission check is good. So I live for those moments because like I didn't take a paycheck until 2023 in this whole company. I've tortured myself for a number of years, and so what gets me happy is seeing other people come to this business and make really good money. Really good money. Like franchisees making good money gets me super excited. When I have staff that I'm like proud. Like if I go to a business conference, I'm like, yeah, average staff member making anywhere from $8,000 to $9,000 a month on average, and they're like, I'm like, no, that's great. Like I think they're like, oh, you could pay people less. It's like, no. Like I want to be known as an employer that pays extremely well. Right? Like you start with us, you may start with us an average salary, but as you get more senior in our company and you've been with us a long time, you get paid well. And that's maybe why we get the loyalty and people aren't scared to make the decisions because, you know, they see the bank account. They know how much money we make. They know where we need to go. They know their paychecks they're getting. They know their involvement. So keep that going, right, and flowing. And our conversations, like when your staff know what's in the bank account, you don't have useless conversation. Oh, I think we should paint the walls pink. Money's not in the account to paint the walls pink, so let's not even have the conversation, right? So when they know the bank balance, conversations and meetings change. Ideas being pitched change.
Wow.
They're like, hey, we need another $30,000 a month in annual recurring revenue, or $30,000 a month in monthly recurring revenue, and it's like, okay, why? Because we need to do this, and this, and this. Right? It's not like, oh, can we afford this? And everyone knows. Everyone knows if we can or cannot afford.
Do you think there's a better system to build a business instead of being transparent and allowing your team to make those kind of decisions early on?
I think Goyle's path is to go public, so we
Yeah.
have to be transparent. So that's kind of maybe why we're doing this transparency now. But there is ways, but then you're going to run into those problems with staff not like running a ship blind is not good. Like you're running a company, it's a huge ship. Everyone needs to know where it's going. Everyone needs to know what's happening. And I'm not saying every staff member needs to know. Like our technicians that work for our corporation that does all the like corporate operations, you know, there's more technicians. None of those guys need to know, right? But like your key decision makers or like your leaders or like your managers, they need the data and numbers. And you know, maybe it's a call center manager that's saying, hey, like your call center costs the company $100,000 a month, right? And this is the revenue that this call center is generating. And so if you want to make decisions, then you're playing with these numbers, right? You give them that data and those numbers. But if you just say, hey, run a call center, and then you just tell them, oh, hey, you're overspending on staff, or your sales aren't up, and you're not giving them the data, and then you get frustrated staff that are like, I don't really want to, like, I don't know how you want me to change. But if they have access to that data, and they can see like, oh my gosh, you know, they see the waste from maybe some of the staff, or they see the waste in some of the spending, or, you know, maybe we need to do a different sales strategy to get better results. Like they just make that decision, right? So I think people need some level of data. They don't necessarily need all of it, but they need some level of data.
I commend and respect you a lot in terms of what you built, and congratulations on everything that you.
We're not done. We're not done. We'll enjoy a few more countries to open.
And this leads me into the next question: is how do you enjoy, or do you enjoy, the fruits of your labor?
Yeah, I'm trying to. Like 2023, since I was 15, I never took a paycheck from any of my companies, and you know, maybe this comes from my parents, but I remember being 15, and my parents were like, yeah, you don't need money. You don't need money. You live rent free. And so I've always built my companies as like, I think the government think I'm broke forever. Like, you know, my accountant always laughed at my tax returns. He's like, you're like homeless. I'm like, yeah, that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
I definitely am. And so it was weird. I had my team vote on my salary for 2023. My team kind of sat down in December 2022, and they're like, you need to be paid for what you do. And so we sat down, and my team's like, so my one guy says, well, I think you should be paid $30,000 a year. And then more executive person was like, oh, $240,000. So I think they decided like $100,000 or something. So 100, I think 110 or something. And the money's been going into a bank account. I have no idea what to do with it because I've lived my whole life without this personal money.
Yeah.
And so I've started investing like $5,000 or $10,000 into like other friends or people that are like, oh, I got a startup, and I'm like, oh, cool, what's your traction? And I'm like, okay, well, here's $5,000. I'll throw $5,000 to your company. If you go bankrupt, I don't really care. But I want to make sure I didn't have that support, so I want to give you that support. And so yeah, it's weird now. Like now I'm trying to get my pilot's license. I'm trying to buy my own plane that does like 400 kilometers an hour. 500. I call it a time machine. I want to own a time machine because, like, for example, I got to go to Saskatoon today. Like, I go to Brandon for a funeral. Then I got to go to Saskatoon for a 50-year-old. And I always say to people, show up to everyone's funerals, birthdays, and weddings. Like, you don't skip. Doesn't matter how much it costs. Like, you don't skip if those people you think are important in your life. And those people that you look up to. So I have to do all that today. If I had that plane today, instead of an 8-hour drive, it would have been a 20-minute flight to Brandon and an hour flight to Saskatoon. And so when you look at your time management, that is a good investment. And I kind of found out about all that because I met this guy that brought Century 21 to Canada back in the 70s, 80s. And he's sold it, and he's I don't know how many billions he has, but he's
74 or 72.
He's very well off. And you know, my investor Ryan said, you got to meet this guy. And so I spent a day with him. He never invested in our company, but I learned a lot from him and learned that he has like a fleet of 7 jets and how they manage that, and it's his favorite business, and his real estate, and like, so I try and hang around those people, right? And what I've learned from all those people is me driving in a car for 8 hours is the most stupid investment that you could make versus like how many places you could go and get things done. And Goyle's getting to the point where like 408 bloody franchise units. you know, we have to open California in the next week or so. You know, you got to jump between all those 3 cities and like commercial flights. Like sometimes commercial is cheap. So it's like, yeah, my passion right now is like finishing pilot's license, getting my own plane. You know, I don't know if it's buying a house. Try not to work every weekend. I'm trying to only work one weekend. I'm trying to build, because I kind of skipped from 16 to now. I skipped that whole like finish high school, do that university party phase and have fun. So I skipped all that. Like it was weird growing up because I was always friends with my friends' parents because they were in business and had more relationships. And I think my average friend I have now is 35 to 45 and my mom's 50, right? So like I'm more friends with people that my parents should be friends with. Sure. But like you hang out with who you want to be, right? Yeah. So people are more well off. Some try to hang out with some people that have built some really cool things or are very passionate about what they do. It doesn't mean they have to have all the money in the world. So yeah, I'm just trying to build a personal life that I ignored and skipped. I think that's the new goal personally.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it was worth it? Like skipping out on all those personal, you know, achievements or life experiences at a young age, but alternatively, if you went to the left side of the road and you achieved something that, you know, the ordinary human...
I don't think I'd be on earth if I did the other one. I don't think I'd be happy. I think it was worth the problems I went through. Mm-hmm. I would do it over again. I would go through all the same... I would even lose all that money with the software stuff. Like, and I would take other ones to other big hits as well. Take them a little better. Yeah. And I'd take them a little better, more eyes open. You know, it makes me sad a little bit because, like, I have friends the same age as me. They already got, like, 4 kids. They got a house. They got a happy little life. And they have so much wealth in that personal side, which I don't. But on the other end, like, you know, you've developed something worth 40+ million. Yeah. You could exit tomorrow, right? So it's more clear, like, that side is something I need to pay attention to before I get too old, right? I want kids. I want 4 kids. I want that wealth side of it. So I built the personal net wealth side, and it's continuing to grow, even though it's not cash you can just access, but it's there. Like there's going to be an exit in some way. But focusing on that part is kind of important. So that's kind of the new goal now.
Do you have any regrets?
I mean, like you can't live life with regrets, right? Like, is there things I wish I didn't do? For sure, but yeah, I think you kind of just develop as a person over time, and you lose people on the way. I think most people kind of figure this out, but who you were friends with in high school and growing up is somebody that you may never know again, right? Like your friends and your people change over time. And Go Oil's history as well within the company, like we've lost people, right? Like, you know, the funniest story I have is I had a guy that was in charge of my franchising, and Ryan was an investor at the time, and Ryan's like, man, you got to meet this guy named Tony. Like Tony is the CEO of College Pro, and he's like amazing. I was like, great, I want to meet Tony. Like Tony sounds great. So I had a conference call with Tony, great call, right? And I was like, I'm really glad Ryan introduced me to Tony. And Tony's like, well, who's your director of franchise sales? And I said the guy's name, and his face went white as a ghost. He's like, oh, he's our director of coaching. We pay him like a Toronto level salary. He's supposed to be working for us full time. And I went white as a ghost because the week before, this guy told me, well, I am 110% dedicated to Go Oil. I got nothing going on. I'm winding down my consulting business. And then I find out he's working for my investor's friend's big company through one of his other franchise brands. And I was like, and I remember firing him. I like walked in the room and I was like, I like you. I think you're a great person. I think you've done it, but I'm firing you because again, you were 100% trusted until you're not. And if you told me you had another job, no problem. You would have never got fired. But if I took you out for dinner the week before and you told me you're 110% dedicated to Go Oil, then I get a conference call with your boss and your boss tells me, so he was fired from both companies. Oh damn. Yeah, because
he had a 9 to 5 and a 5 to 9.
That was a classic COVID thing. Like people had multiple jobs, right? Hiding them from each other. Ooh. Yeah, that was hilarious. So every time I run into Tony, it's kind of like a laughing thing. It's like, remember that? And he's like, yeah.
If you were to walk away from this podcast, is there anything that we haven't touched on today that you think we missed or you would like to touch on?
Man, it's been hard. This has been like the business stuff has been tough. I think most people need to realize you're judged on what you do and what you say, right? Like, who you are as a person. Like, one thing, I kind of got from our investors is like, they're more investing in the person, not necessarily the business. Like, the business to a point, but typically if you can find rare entrepreneurs, then those rare entrepreneurs are going to produce more companies, right? So like, even me throwing 5 or 10 grand into people who I think are potentially about to be good entrepreneurs or are good entrepreneurs, maybe their current business I don't necessarily understand, but I don't want to be tied to them as they go through their ups and downs, right? Because I'm here for it, right? So yeah, like, you could have zero revenue. You'd be losing money, right? You can still raise money. You get the right people that believe in you, you're good to go. So like, really focus on those relationships, the networks. Like, if Goel needed to raise $500,000 within 24 hours, I could get it done in 10. 3 or 4 phone calls, done. Because you build those network and people, you've done business with them, you build that trust, you're good to go. So within 3 phone calls, I think that's filled. And even if I phoned some of them and they said, "What do you need the money for?" I'm like, "I can't tell you." But that's over 15 years of building that relationship. It's like, I'm not going to screw you. I got you, but we're good to go, right? So yeah, just people need to focus on how you react in situations and how, like, you really need to pay attention to that.
And you do that to other people as well. You mentioned, friends, family, and you also mentioned very interesting before we started recording how you'll at an airport just be like, "Hey, I'll..." Why is that important to you? Why is it important to give back?
I think at the end of the day, we're all trying to be good humans, right? So I think I'm a big believer in karma. So if I put out good karma in the world, then good karma may come back to me. It doesn't necessarily have to. So for example, like, perfect. Like, I fly so much, I've maxed out my rewards with WestJet. And if WestJet is watching this, ban me for what I'm about to say next. But WestJet allows you to take 5 family members into any lounge with your ticket. So I go to the gate, same flight, go to the gate, and if there's a mom with 2 children or like a young family or some older people that just look like maybe they haven't flown in 10 years, right? And I always try and meet people when I travel. I'm very intentional about meeting people, like whether it's the person sitting beside or at the airport, because you never know who people know. You never know. They could be one connection away from who you're actually trying to get to. And so being a good human, I'm always like, "Hey, we got some time before the flight. You want to come to the lounge? I got free passes." And just say you're my cousin. And so people come in and I've built some really good relationships. And we've gotten business deals done through those relationships. So being a good human, always like I said, show up for people's funerals, show up for people's birthdays, show up for people's weddings. Like, don't sleep on that. And just really intentional with like putting out that good karma. And
your grade 1 self would be proud.
I think it's something that I do internally is you kind of say mentally, you ask your younger self, like, if you were to tell your 10-year-old self, what he's about to go to, what would you tell him, right? And if I were to tell my 10-year-old self, I was like, "Man, you're going to go through some hell, but it's going to be some fun. Keep your head up and like enjoy the waves, but also keep your eyes really open when it's pretty low. You're going to have a very cool company. You're going to have a lot of people that you're benefiting, and maybe learn to pay yourself a little sooner. And it's okay to take money out of the company for you. And then, you do the same thing in reverse. You ask your older self, like, what is it that you think I need to know at this age, right? Like, what would a more experience? So you kind of mentally do that. You should do it at least once a week, right? And I think it's called mirroring or something like that. But I think it's important to kind of like step out and kind of make sure that you're still aligned with where you want to go, right? So, because it's scary at times, like it's scary, and sometimes you have to do scary situations. Like, we had a franchisee that just went AWOL, like just disappeared off the face of the earth. I got on a plane. I showed up to their house. I knocked on that door for 3 hours. And he finally opened the door, and I said, "We owe it to each other to have a conversation." And he's like, I thought you were going to go away." I was like, "No, we owe it to each other to have a conversation. I'm not going to sue you. We owe it to each other to have a conversation."
Wow.
Brought me in, we had a cup of tea, his wife was there, And I said, by the end of this conversation, we have to have a game plan, right? And we can't hide from it, like you've been trying to hide from it, but it took me getting on a plane to then come in and deal with this. And I'm here to deal with it as a human. Like, I get you're human, I'm human, and this relationship didn't work. I look at it as a marriage, so how do we get out of this marriage? What's fair?
Oh.
So sometimes you have to do that. It's scary. Like, the whole time I'm like,
It's 2 hours, 45 minutes.
yeah. I knew he was home.
Yeah.
But like, I think a lot of people are just too scared to do that, right?
Yeah.
And I remember going on the plane. I was like, do I really want to do this? And Kelly, who's on my team, she's like, no one's gonna do it but you. No one's gonna do it but you. And whenever things go bad, I always say to people, like, even when lawyers get involved, I'll just phone them. I'll be like, let's not spend money. Let's have a 20-minute conversation. We owe it. We got in bed together. We owe it to each other to sit down and have that conversation, right? Whereas a lot of people want to hide behind a brick wall. I'm like, okay, get rid of the brick wall for now. Yeah, let's chat. So yeah, learning to have those difficult conversations is a skill that you should definitely take up.
Is that where you deploy the emotion side? Or do you still think logically in the sense? Yeah,
so I try to remember emotion. Like, you know, I think it's 48 Laws of Power or like The Art of War. Like, you read those books, you can mentally just like try and block some of your personal stuff as you go into these situations, because business is war. Yeah. I'm going to be honest, like, it's tactical. You know, even firing clients. Like, we had a client that was emailing all of our franchisees saying, I want to pay you outside the Go Oil system. And they were a significant client, and I said, "You're fired. I didn't care how much money they spent with us. You're fired. Like, you don't come in and disrespect all this work that my team and my other franchisees have done. You will never ever work with Go Oil." And we went back to the franchisees and we said, if any franchisee is caught doing service for this particular client that wanted to go around the system that we've all, because like when a franchise invests into a system, they're pouring money into it. Yeah. So if somebody's trying to like break the system, it doesn't just hurt us as a franchisor, it hurts the franchisee. So we told the franchisees, if any of you are doing it, like minimum like $1,000 fine. Yeah. And they're all like, no, we agree. Like it hurts us as a brand if all of a sudden clients are then trying to circumvent the system. Yeah. It's not good.
Wow. That's very commendable.
Learning to say no to money, it doesn't matter how big it is like there's like I remember when we fired our best franchisee, every time when we got on the phone with him, it's like 50 F-bombs all the time. And I had staff members that were in tears, and I remember I phoned up our investors and I said, I don't care how good he is, I don't care what his revenue is, you can't spend time with that. So you can't spend time with those people, that culture. And so we quickly exited that franchisee. And I remember the lawyer on the other side's like, I am so confused why you're exiting him. I was like, because he, you know what, like, you can't treat my stuff that way.
Yeah, it's not the right fit. Yeah. If you have any advice for someone who's watching, or even ourselves as well, like we hope to achieve, the similar
start yesterday. Yeah, start yesterday. But to be honest, like, yesterday's gone. You're living today, you could die tomorrow. Yeah. So not necessarily you have to spend your whole bank account today and live in today's moment, but be a little bit mindful of where you spend your time and who you spend your time with. Like, it always drives me nuts when somebody's like, oh, I'm going to stay in the city until like spring, until I get my bonus to then move to this city and like start the business. And I'm just like, you could die by spring. Yeah. Like you could drive your car and get run off the road. Like, a lot can happen. So if this is what you truly want to do, then just do it. Like, I don't want to hear, oh, I'm just gonna wait for the perfect time. I'm just like, oh, like, oh, then what? Oh, you have a boyfriend or girlfriend now, and now you can't do it. You're more tied down. I'm just like, guys, if your gut's telling you to do something, do it. Yeah. And maybe you end up getting burnt and hurt, but maybe your gut was telling you need to learn a lesson. It doesn't necessarily need to be successful. Yeah. Right? Like, maybe your little you inside you is like, man, you need to learn something, and then let the world take you through that lesson.
Yeah. All right. On that note, I think this is the best way to end off the podcast. Yeah. If you haven't already, please check out Jonathan. We'll tag everything in the description below. Hit that like button, subscribe, and until next time. Peace.
Let's go.
Hopefully that's a good one for you guys.
Yeah. Thank you.